Welcome to the Fleet News Group podcast, your go-to source for expert insights, industry trends and conversations with leaders shaping the future of fleet and transport. I'm Mark Sibbald and I'm thrilled to be back for another episode. Over the past 3 years, we've had the privilege of sitting down with key decision makers, innovators and thought leaders who are driving change across the industry. This podcast is your opportunity to hear their stories, challenges and successes. Wherever you are, whether you're in the office, on the road, or simply tuning in on the go. In this episode, I'm at Fully Charged, or Everything Electric, in the Sydney Showgrounds, Sydney Olympic Park area. It's back for its third year, and looking out across the show floor, it's bigger than ever. My guest is Dan Caesar. We interviewed Dan last year. Carolyn Falls did that in 2024. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to talk to him again. Dan's the CEO of the Fully Charged Everything Electric road train that travels the world, encouraging people to take up electric vehicles. Dan, welcome back to Australia. It's been fantastic out on the show floor. I've been here since the opening. I'm really amazed at the number of manufacturers and vehicles and people. But what I really liked was in your opening speech to the press, you talked about the UK market and you talked about the differences between Australia and the UK. Can you maybe share some of that again with our audience?
Of course, I think the UK and Australia have some comparables that are worth going through. You know, you can look at the leader as, you know, Norway, or for percentage EV sales, or China for volume EV sales, but they're not really that relevant really to what's going on the ground in some of the developed Western countries that are sort of slightly earlier in that kind of uptake of EV. So I think there's some interesting parallels between what's going on in Europe, specifically the UK, and Australia as well, because of the right-hand drive situation. So we work extensively in North America as well, and that market's probably going to slow down due to recent political upheaval, let's put it that way. But we're pretty optimistic about the UK, and we're pretty optimistic about Australia as well. Our feeling really is Australia is probably where the UK was about 4 or 5 years ago, but could potentially catch up, depending on political will, consumer adoption, etc. But recently in the UK, last year, about 20% of new cars, were electric vehicles, pure electric vehicles. That's up to about 25% month on month now, so that's growing pretty well. We did have a really good early adopter scene, got up to about 15%, and it really hit the skids. It plateaued out for a good 2 or 3 years, just because the plug-in car grant was taken away, the charger grant was taken away. So there was some political interference that meant it slowed down, but now it's back on the growth curve again. So Australia is really interesting, I think, because obviously it's at a lower level of adoption than that at the moment. And I know the last couple of months' sales haven't been that great, but we will remain really optimistic. And one of the reasons we're so optimistic, as you mentioned, looking at the show floor here, is the sheer competition between the car makers is extraordinary. More here, I think, than anywhere else that we've been.
You mentioned there was brands here that you've never seen before?
Yeah, brands we know, but we've not seen at our shows before. And obviously, we're a long ways away in the UK from China. And obviously, Australia's got that little bit more proximity. It's part of the Oceania, Asia Pacific region. And so Chinese brands are looking at Australia as one of the sort of first port of call. And now we've got, there's so many brands here, it's hard to remember. We've got Deepal here, we've got Leap, we've got Zeekr, we've got Xpeng, and so on and so forth, in addition to all of the other players. And what that means is intense competition, and clearly that will mean a price war of some form or another, which for drivers is potentially very, very good news indeed. So if you couple that to the fact that the Australia has lots of sunshine, electricity is cheaper here than the UK, for example, so charging is cheaper as well. We think there are the right conditions really for the EV market to really grow quite quickly here, subject to the fact that we need to say, bluntly, that actually it's cheaper to drive an EV, something we've been a bit embarrassed to say about before. We need to be clearer about that.
Yeah, well, fleets are certainly the total cost of ownership with the prices, capital prices coming down, are really changing that mix there. If I can ask you about Canada, because you guys are in the, Vancouver is the show there.
Yeah.
What's that market like?
That's a good market. I spent quite a long time doing the political litmus tests when I go to those places. Before we choose where we go, quite a lot of the conversation now is about politics, both sort of, provincial, statewide, and also national. How's that going? What's the support for battery electric vehicles? Because that can have a big impact. At the moment, Canada and how it responds to, tariffs, potential tariffs in the US, is a cause of concern. But British Columbia, which is where Vancouver is fairly wealthy part of the world. It's beautiful outdoorsy environmental place. So lots of the people who live there are, a little bit more environmental in nature. And there's also quite a big tech scene there as well. So actually EVs have sold really, really well. So they're about 20% of new car sales in Vancouver. Occasionally it's outpaced California. So if I was going to be anywhere in the North American continent at the moment, that's where I would want to be with the show. But we are a little bit, concerned, keeping an eye on what happens with the US, because it's only a couple of hours across the border before you get into places like Portland and Seattle. So it is an interesting market. Elections and electrons don't mix. That's our phrase. There's lots of politicians who are very pro-EV, and that's great. There are some who really want to weaponize it and make it seem like a bad thing.
Yeah.
Which is such a shame, because as any EV driver knows, they're great technologies. Yeah. And fundamentally, if you forget everything, if you forget all the politics, all the culture, all the soft stuff, if you do the maths about EVs, they are a better bet than anything else.
Yeah. So I was in the US in February, and there was a lot of, not much talk with fleets. So they haven't really adopted. But there also seems to be an underlying current that through the Biden administration, there was stuff happening, but there seems to be a bit of positivity that's going to continue. It's not going to completely wiped out by Trump. Are you seeing something similar?
Well, last time Trump got in, we saw a lot of, state initiatives. So even though at a national level they were kind of rolling things back, state, cities, companies were doing things their own way because they knew it made common sense. So yeah, I think there will be a lot of people who will dig their heels in and say, no, electric vehicles, it's really, really important. It just affects the mood music in a country. If you've got a leader who's very kind of anti-EV, it does unfortunately give the people who are also anti-EV an excuse, doesn't it? To say, we don't like this technology. But no, I think the EV market will still probably grow there, but I think it just will slow down for a period of time. But I think at fleet level it'll be fairly secure, because as I say, it's all about spreadsheets. It's all about the maths, and EVs always make good sense when you get them down to the bare numbers.
All right. Let's talk about the test drive aspect of this show. I think manufacturers have been using that model for a long time, through rental cars, fleets and other fleets getting bums on seats, as they call it. Your show, are they the biggest test drive events everywhere you go?
I think they're the biggest test drive events in the world. As soon as we started launching the shows back in 2018, we had a test drive program. Actually, I remember the first show we did, there was quite a big distance between the venue and the train station at Silverstone in the UK where we had it. And actually Tesla model owners came and volunteered their time, and they drove people from the car parks in Teslas, and that was great. And we ran a few test drives, and that's become a bigger and bigger part of what we're doing. We're hoping to run best part of 10,000 here. But at the moment, you can go to a dealership and you could spend some time looking at a car, and then maybe you get to see another one, but it's a bit of a trial and tribulation to do that. A friend of mine said, I looked at a car, and then I looked at another car the next weekend, and another one the following weekend. By the end of it, I'd forgotten what the first one was like. So we've got multi-brand test drives here. You could easily test drive 3 or 4 comparable cars in a single day. There's nothing extra. It doesn't cost anything extra to do that. And the thing with electric is, actually switching from petrol car to petrol car, as we've done over the years, is so easy, right? It's very little difference. You kind of need to get in and experience it. You kind of need to do the test drive, and it's a big conversion tool. There's plenty of people who are unsure maybe about electric, and they get in them and they go, what was all the fuss about? It's quiet, it's smooth, the tech's very good, and generally people are kind of won over just by doing test drives. So yeah, I would say it's, if anything, along with the educational piece that we do, the talks we do, it's probably the core thing that makes these shows so successful.
Yeah. And just talking about the tech, like have you seen a lot of change from in the models and the cars and what they're offering now compared to what they were 5 years ago, for example?
Yeah, there's some big changes. You can't talk about electric cars very easily and not mention Tesla. They have, in terms of the tech within the cars, been absolutely instrumental in kind of leading the way. But I've got to say, some of the other technologies in the cars now is just exceptional. And some of the Asian manufacturers, the Chinese and the Koreans, are really leading the way in that respect. So now you're really sort of spoiled for choice. And there are still a few car companies, I'm not going to name them, whose tech is a little bit sort of last generation. And I think it is going to be harder for them to compete, because once you get used to your iPhone or your Samsung or whatever technology you favor, once you get used to high quality tech, it's actually quite hard to go back. So yeah, the amount of tech in the cars now is fantastic. And actually, what I also say, it's good from a safety point of view as well. The cars are really safe, and they're quiet. I think they're a pleasure to drive. But I would always say, don't believe me. Come down and test one at our shows yourself.
The safety is a big thing for fleets. Another big thing that fleets is residual values or used values. And you mentioned in your opening address about the UK market that vehicles are starting to flow through to the used market now. Can you maybe give us a bit of an idea of what's happening on that side?
Yeah, I mean, the used market in the UK it grew about 57%, I think it was, year on year last year. It takes a little while, doesn't it, for the new car market to feed through to the used market. So there's tons of choice now. The best value in the UK is at the used level. 7 out of 8 car purchases in the UK are used. It's a major access point for most people. But certainly, initially, it has kind of made pricing, residual value a little bit unpredictable. So I think things have settled down in the UK now, but there was a little bit of a drop in prices. So a couple of years ago, Tesla dropped the prices of their new cars. Other companies, their competitors, sort of followed suit. All of that has had a little bit of a domino effect, and so there was a bit of a correction, I would say, in terms of the value of the cars, both new and used. But it probably was because some of the EVs originally were probably a little bit overpriced. And now that's been corrected, so now you can get some great value. In Australia, the cars are already pretty good value already. I don't think there's such that bubble between what they should cost and what they do cost. But in the UK, for example, Porsche Taycan, great car, very expensive, and there has been an issue with residual values there. There's quite a few of those available quite cheap, and some of the people who went out and bought those in the first instance have probably, if they bought them outright, might be regretting it a little bit. But interesting to see what companies are doing now. There is a new organisation here, which is part of the Volkswagen Group, called On EV, that are launching here this weekend, and they're actually looking at future value guarantee, because they know it's a key question that's coming up. So I think those things will work themselves through. But as I say, Australia's got some fantastic value new cars, and the used cars will only get more.
So I suppose the manufacturers have just as much a role to play as the leasing companies and everyone in maintaining
no one wants to get caught in that situation. But what Australia has more than the UK has is just this extraordinary competition between the manufacturers. Honestly, it's blown us away this year, and it's going to only lead one way, which is better prices for people who want to buy electric cars, whether that's individuals or fleets. So it's quite an exciting time for the Australian market. I think it's going to go quite fast from this point forward.
So just staying on the used car market, like state of health of batteries, is that something that they're talking about in the UK and Europe a lot?
There's 2 battery health certificate schemes in the UK. There's talk about having a battery passport scheme as well. I know that, again, on EV, I've just mentioned, they're looking at battery health certificates. The VW, I think it's the Audi, I was speaking to them yesterday, they've got an 8-year warranty, 100,000 mile warranty on their cars. They're so confident. But actually, anecdotally, we're seeing lots of EVs now that are doing 200,000 miles. It's actually the battery is outlasting the chassis, and electric cars are outlasting combustion.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your launch. So they're actually going longer. So that whole battery.
I posted a tweet about this when Twitter was cool about 10 years ago. I said, actually, what really should terrify incumbent car companies is that actually, I think some of these cars will last double the length of the combustion engine vehicle. So you're effectively replacing one purchase, almost 2 cars. Now, obviously, that will go through the used, market, but that could be quite significant, right? If they last twice as long, that's going to have a massive impact on the total number of cars that are sold over time. So I love talking about the car industry. I'm very close to it, understand what's going on. I wouldn't want to necessarily work for a car company. There's some great work going on, but it's quite a tricky challenge. It's a new market, right? Yeah. And you having to figure stuff out on the fly is quite tricky.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks for making the time. Really appreciate it. Now, this isn't your only trip to Australia this year, is it? You're actually coming back.
We're coming back with Everything Electric at Melbourne in November. We're really excited about that. We've not finished there, I don't think. I think we would probably like to do a third city in Australia at some point, but we are Brits. So we have to work out how we're gonna do that. We'll probably set up, have more people working here for us as well. But yeah, Melbourne in November, back to Sydney in March, and then fingers crossed, somewhere else in 2027.
Excellent. Well, it's a fantastic show. It's great to have you back for the third year, and look forward to catching you again in Melbourne.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a wrap for this episode of the Fleet News Group podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this discussion insightful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It really helps other people find the show. You can stay up to date with the latest industry news by visiting any of the Fleet News Group websites: Fleet EV News, Fleet Auto News, and Fleet HV News. And remember, we release 2 episodes each month, so look out for the next episode with more expert insights and discussions. If you can't wait, just scroll through the episodes we've got already and you'll find plenty of good stories to listen to. And coming soon, the Fleet News Group magazine. Look out for it in the exhibitions and trade displays and in Qantas Club lounges. We also have the Novated Leasing Guide for 2025 available in Qantas Club lounges, so check that out as well if you're travelling. So that's it for now. Until next time, drive safe and stay informed.